Hi, and welcome everyone to Whole Soul School and Foundation's second Fireside Chats for March 2020. My name is Marie Mohler, and I am an author, intuitive, and the co-founder of Whole Soul School and Foundation. I am here with my co-host and co-founder, Lacy Frazer, who is a clinical psychologist by training and a practicing life coach and consciousness educator today. So I want to welcome everyone back to Whole Soul School and Foundation's Fireside Chats podcast series. And I first want to remind our listeners that our mission here is to educate, enrich, integrate, and liberate the heart and soul in people worldwide. Additionally, we support projects and other philanthropic missions that educate and empower people whose lives have been impacted by incarceration. We hold a core belief that the conversation and the connection we share here is the education, and we are dedicated to creating inspiring and engaging conversations here to hopefully ignite your sense of inner peace, grounding, freedom, purpose, empowerment, and personal transformation in your life today. So I want to welcome Lacy to the conversation today. Welcome, Lacy.
Hi, Marie. So glad to be here.
I know. I'm glad to be here together again, talking about just these important energies, what's happening on the planet, and really giving all of us a chance to tune in for some inward inspiration.
Absolutely.
Right? In these times, as the world shelters globally at this time due to the coronavirus.
Yeah. So important.
So I wanted to, I think you and I were both thinking about sharing from our hearts and minds what might inspire other people who were in our homes, were sheltering in place at this time, who might be seeking some inspiration, another perspective, another lens on their life and what's going on in the world today. So, and to tune into what really connects us and interconnects us versus what divides and separates us right now as we're kind of, sheltered in place inside our homes with less daily contact with other people.
Yeah, it certainly gives us a lot of time to think about a lot of things, and hopefully most people are sort of doing some self-reflection. And I know you and I have been doing a lot of self-reflection during this time, and certainly talking about different kinds of content and topics that we could talk about that would inspire and uplift people. And one of the topics that we sort of kept coming back around to for today was the topic of resilience. And I think that I would love to talk about the topic of resilience, but with a little bit of a twist to it. Marie, when we look up the definition of resilience, it means really sort of bouncing back, bouncing back to what was. And that's that traditional definition, I think, to be honest, if I dare speak against, Webster's dictionary, isn't really that accurate, because I think the fact is that after we experience a trauma or a stressor
or a challenge
or any kind of challenge, right? The goal isn't necessarily to bounce back to what was before that stressor. Because inevitably, I don't really think that's possible, because I think trauma and stressors tend to change us no matter what. And so I really believe that it's actually about embracing what we can learn from the trauma, and allow the change and the alchemy that is going to happen within us to become a better person and a stronger person as we move through the trauma and the challenge and the stressor.
Exactly. And we can't help but be changed by the circumstances we've just grown through.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And,
it's just like anyone, and we're talking about the coronavirus, and I know we're going to be talking about a lot of things today, but anybody that's been exposed to a virus or a bug, our physical systems, our physical bodies then have that in our immune system so it can recognize that in the future and we're stronger because of it. I mean, that's kind of a natural immunity type response, right?
Right.
And the same thing is true of when we're facing challenges and stressors. So we're building our physical, emotional, spiritual, mental muscles when we're going through things that change us. So when we get on the other side of the challenge, we're not the same people we once were. So it is kind of a myth, isn't it, that we want to get back to normal or we want to get back to who we were.
Right.
But we're always changing, and especially through challenge, we just accelerate those changes inside us, or they get amplified a little bit more so that we can really recognize we've had a growth spurt because of it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And as I was sort of researching the topic a little bit more, of course, Brene Brown's book, Rising Strong, came up. And of course, her work is just phenomenal around resilience. But there was another guy I came across by the name of Eric Greiton, who wrote a book called Resilience. And I just want to read a quote from there, which sort of speaks to this concept that we're talking about. It says, "Life's reality is that we cannot bounce back. We cannot bounce back because we cannot go back in time to the people we used to be. The parent who loses a child never bounces back. The 19-year-old who sails off for war is gone forever, even if he returns." And there is no bouncing back. There's only moving through. So what happens to us becomes a part of us. Resilient people do not bounce back from hard experiences. They find healthy ways to integrate them into their lives. And in time, people find that great calamity met with great spirit can create great strength.
Exactly.
And I love that because I think that's really the truth of what resilience is all about. So here we are. We've got this virus in the news, a stressor, a potential trauma to many. And so how can we become thoughtful and aware of how the introduction of this stressor, called the coronavirus, how is it here to touch us? What is it calling up in us to help us move through and become a better person and to grow our strength, as Eric Crichton talks about?
Yeah. It's a powerful question that I don't think is often many people's first thought when they experience a stressor or a challenge in our lives or something unexpected, right? That takes us out of our routines, takes us out of our rhythms and what's familiar. And we're faced with dealing with something that could even invoke fear in some of us, right? These questions of how is it going to help make me grow? What am I going to learn from this? What am I seeing inside myself that I wasn't seeing before? These aren't always questions that we were taught as children to learn how to embrace the events of life, right? There's kind of a myth that we want to have these happy, easy, peaceful lives, that nothing shakes up our world. But life is messy. Right? Life is messy and we're meant to live it, which means we're meant to have experiences. And I think just that shift in the lens of our perception, that we're here to grow through experiences versus work hard and effort to maintain a status quo. And sometimes I think viruses come into our lives, and that could be a metaphor or it can be a literal virus, but they come into our life to help us stretch and grow and expand so that we don't get too comfortable in our lives and that we forget why we're here. A soul is always craving to expand itself. It wants to know itself better, and it expands through experience.
That's right.
And so we are clearly, as a human collective, right, on this planet, going through a big summoning and invitation to grow to a new level, to awaken in our consciousness. And this is just one of the ways that I think that's happening. And if I were to say, Lacy, when I think of a challenge or a personality trait or even a virus, right, there's light and shadow in everything. Right? There's light aspects to everything in our lives and there's shadow aspects. Even our greatest talents, Lacy, there's a light side to our greatest talents and a shadow side.
Right.
right? I think that's how we could see people who like walk the path of bringing blessings and they live in service to the world. And then you have people who take those very same gifts and talents and become, corrupt and, seek other ways for those gifts and talents in the world. And so there's light and shadow to just about everything. And on the light side of a virus, right, it sometimes resets us. It cleans out toxins out of our bodies, right? It shines a light on what's not working in our bodies, and it can force us to make better choices with respect to what we're putting into our bodies, right? It can often make us more conscious of like whether we're coughing or sneezing, taking care of the family members around us by being more conscious about our behaviors. We become more aware of vitamin C and things that would support our physical body. We just become more conscious all the way around when we're not feeling that great of what we need to do to feel better. And we don't always behave that way, right? When we're healthy, we often take advantage of our health and we take it for granted.
Right.
But when we're feeling like our health is decreasing or we have a virus we're dealing with, the light side of that is that it does make us take better care of ourselves, be more conscious, be more purposeful in what we're doing. So, in this lighter side of experiencing a virus or a challenge in our lives, right? It's an opportunity to tap into our light, our goodness, and foster more a sense of empowerment inside us, to take back our power and our personal responsibility, and to move through the experience from that place of inner empowerment. But on the shadow side of a virus, right, it can trigger many things, including fear, of course, right? Fear of further illness, fear of all that's not working in our bodies, and even a fear of death, right? And
absolutely.
So that also has been triggered in the collective in this experience.
Right.
And so fear is certainly, I would say, on the shadow side of this virus. And fear, as we know, lowers the immune system, right?
Right.
It takes us, we become more vulnerable to the very things we're fearing, right? And we don't feel empowered. When we're in our fear, we're not in a place of inner power and inner strength, and I would say even inner resilience. Our power is being given to something outside of us that might be coming to get us or might be coming to affect us and give us a negative experience, right? So the question is, in some ways, is which contagion do we want to take in, right? The light and the goodness, or the fear and the shadow of the virus, right? And so we can really, and here's the metaphor that people use, but things go viral on the internet. In that word, when most people say viral, they usually mean like a mass spread, right? But we can make consciousness and kindness and thoughtfulness. Neighbors are helping each other out, right? Those kinds of positive attributes and energies and actions can go viral. People can become more caring and conscious. The other option is the shadow side of this virus, which is a contagion that can take us all deep into fear. And really all the more negative. It can divide us. It can create arguments about what people understand about the virus, what we don't yet understand. Is that person an expert? Are they not an expert? Or is there enough toilet paper in the store, right? Or are they sold out of vitamin C? Or all the things that would make us trigger into not having what we need, and feelings of lack and scarcity and disempowerment and all of those things. And so in this way, it's a powerful catalyst of some kind of growth, if we can look at it that way. And we're talking from a little bit of a zoomed out lens, right? We're not, in the hospitals treating these people. We're talking about a spiritual perspective more on this, a consciousness perspective on what a trigger like a virus like this could potentially offer to each of us, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you said, so which contagion do you want to choose? I hear the word contagion and I think bad, I think negative, but the truth is what we're saying is, do you want to choose love or fear? Because that's really all there is, love or fear. And do you want to choose love side of a virus or the fear side of a virus? And we do have a choice.
Right.
And so when
there's lots of things that can be contagious. They even say laughter is contagious.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Love is contagious.
Right.
But we don't, you're
There's
right.
just as many amazing positive things.
But we don't associate that word of being
Right.
contagious
Right.
with a positive experience or a
Right.
positive event. So
Right.
because I think that's also part of our conditioning, that we've been trained to be afraid or to fear things we don't understand or that we feel like we don't have control over, so that it becomes a contagion that we're trying to contain or cast away, right?
Right.
And
Right.
in this sense, the lighter side of contagiousness is that it can bring us together. It can make us more connected. We can unite as a world over what this is.
Right.
And that is really powerful if you look at it through that different lens.
Yeah.
Just being willing to
Yeah.
look at it from a different lens
Yeah.
is a positive thing.
Huge.
What is this here to teach us as a humanity?
Yes.
Right? What can we learn?
Yes, exactly. And when we do these fireside chats, I always think of them, on the one hand, it is we want to provide inspiration, but we also like to provide tools for the listeners. And
Right.
so I found I have a story that I have used in class and with people before that has a deeper message about kind of the best way we can treat humanity and how we can help each other. And so I want to read it. It's called The Rabbi's Gift by M. Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled. And I'm reading this from a place I would say to the listener, I want you to absolutely take the larger message from this story. It's not about religion as much as it is about faith and faith in humanity. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and I hope our listeners see this as sort of a gift and a tool for them. So this story concerns a monastery that had fallen upon hard times. Once a great order, as a result of waves of anti-monastic persecution in the 17th and 18th centuries and the rise of secularism in the 19th, all its branch houses were lost, and it had become decimated to the extent that there were only 5 monks left in the decaying mother house. The abbot and 4 others, all over 70 years in age. Clearly, it was a dying order. In the deep woods surrounding the monastery, there was a little hut that a rabbi from a nearby town occasionally used for hermitage. Through their many years of prayer and contemplation, the old monks had become a bit psychic, so they could always sense when the rabbi was in his hermitage. "The rabbi is in the woods. The rabbi is in the woods once again," they would whisper to each other. As he agonized over the imminent death of his order, it occurred to the abbot at one such time to visit the hermitage and ask the rabbi if by some possible chance he could offer any advice that might save the monastery. The rabbi welcomed the abbot at his hut, but when the abbot explained the purpose of his visit, the rabbi could only commiserate with him. "I know how it is," he explained. "The spirit is gone out of the people. It is the same in my town. Almost no one comes to synagogue anymore." So the old abbot and the old rabbi wept together. Then they read parts of the Torah and quietly spoke of deep things. The time came when the abbot had to leave. They embraced each other. "It has been a wonderful thing that we should meet after all these years," the abbot said. "But I have still failed in my purpose for coming here. Is there nothing you can tell me, no piece of advice you can give me that would help me save my dying order?" "No, I am sorry," the rabbi responded. "I have no advice to give. The only thing I can tell you is that the Messiah is one of you." When the abbot returned to the monastery, his fellow monks gathered around him to ask, Well, what did the rabbi say?" "He couldn't help," the abbot answered. "We just wept and we read the Torah together. The only thing he did say just as I was leaving, which was something kind of cryptic, was that the Messiah is one of us. And I don't know what he meant." In the days and weeks and months that followed, the old monks pondered this and wondered whether there was any possible significance to the rabbi's words. The Messiah is one of us? Could he possibly have meant one of us monks here at the monastery? If that's the case, which one? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? Oh, yes, if he meant anyone, he probably meant Father Abbot. He's been our leader for more than a generation. On the other hand, he might have meant Brother Thomas. Certainly Brother Thomas is a holy man. Everyone knows that Thomas is a man of light. Certainly he could not have meant Brother Elred. Elred gets crotchety at times. But come to think of it, even though he is a thorn in people's sides, when you look back on it, Elred is virtually always right. Actually, very right much of the time. Maybe the rabbi did mean Brother Elred. But surely not Brother Philip. Philip is so passive, a real nobody. But then, almost mysteriously, he has a gift for somehow always being there when you need him. He just magically appears by your side. Maybe Philip is the Messiah. Well, of course the rabbi didn't mean me. Couldn't possibly have meant me. I'm just an ordinary person. Yet, suppose he did. Suppose I am the Messiah. Oh gosh, not me. I couldn't be that much for you, could I? As they contemplated in this manner, the old monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect, on the off chance that one among them might be the Messiah, and on the off chance that each monk himself might be the Messiah, they began to treat themselves with extraordinary respect. Because the forest in which it was situated was beautiful, it so happened that people still occasionally came to visit the monastery to picnic on its tiny lawn, to wander along some of its paths, even now and then to go in the dilapidated chapel to meditate. And as they did so, without even being conscious of it, they sensed this aura of extraordinary respect that now began to surround the 5 old monks and seemed to radiate out from them and permeate the atmosphere of the place. There was something strangely attractive, even compelling about it. Hardly knowing why, they began to come back to the monastery more frequently to picnic, to play, and to pray. They began to bring their friends to show them this very special place. And their friends brought their friends. And then it happened that some of the younger men who came to visit the monastery started to talk more and more with the old monks. And after a while, one asked if he could join them, and then another, and another. And so within a few years, the monastery once again became a thriving order, and thanks to the rabbi's gift, a vibrant center of light and spirituality in the realm.
I really enjoy that story. I'd heard it sometime a long time ago, but hearing it again, it's so powerful, and there's obviously many lessons we can take away from that story, just like any parable offers you layers to really look inside yourself and extract the marrow of the messages, right? But to me, I would say this story illustrates a lot of what we're talking about, right? These monks in the beginning of the story are experiencing and expressing a kind of lack and scarcity resulting in a dying order, right? Yeah. They're aware that the life force is leaving their little monastery.
Right.
And scarcity in this context is the virus, right?
Right.
They feel a lack of funds, a lack of energy, a lack of interest. You hear that the lack.
And a sense of disempowerment to do anything about it.
Right? And so, and they all 5 of them, right, believe that their order is dying. But when another lens is offered, which is the rabbi's gift, he just plants the seed of another way to see, right?
Exactly.
He plants the seed, and it's a way to view each other and themselves differently. They were able to contemplate the good, the light within themselves and others, and they begin to claim their light and their goodness and what makes each of them magnificent. And so, we believe here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, right, and we've seen it many times in our own lives, that when we can actively and consciously choose to live our light, to embrace our light, to live our talents, to embrace our gifts, and we activate that inner healer, right? Mm-hmm. Even in these challenging times, it can absolutely shift these times, right? So, some families might be saying, oh, my kids are going crazy and, they're off school and and it's shaken up all of our rhythms and all the things that we normally do. And, you can really grumble and complain about all of the changes, or you can also, I can say that even in my own neighborhood, I see families walking together. And people, even though we're, having a sort of social distancing in a certain kind of way, that's part of the protocols right now. But in the same vein, I'm watching people connect more. Isn't it interesting?
Well,
with social distancing, there's a greater connection because a lot of the other noise that surrounds us and the go, go, go that we have in our lives, we just didn't have the eyes to see even just the value of just, being home.
Right.
And having time to clean out your garage or to do those 5 loads of laundry you just couldn't get to, or to have that conversation with your son, or to reach out to an old friend that you hadn't in a long time, or write that letter. Who writes letters anymore? But
right.
To write that letter to somebody to express some gratitude. Or we can be more conscious and deliberate in this time right now because we're not distracted by all of the things that normally call on our attention. And it is interesting.
Well, what I love about the overall message of this story too is that, these monks, number one, they sort of feel powerless over the revival of the order, and it isn't until somebody plants the seed that each of them
has
greatness inside of them.
Right.
Each of them has potential. Each of them has the likeness of God inside them, so to speak, and as they start to contemplate that, they might see the negatives in somebody, but then they quickly switch it and they can see the positive through this new lens. And then they begin to think of themselves in that way as well. And just the shifting of the perspective and the contemplation of the greatness of what this could be and who I could be and who you could be, right, revives everything, brings the order back. Life because force. People can feel it.
Right. They're tapping into a different source of energy.
Right.
Versus they were depleted and kind of fearful before. And in that scarcity consciousness they were living. And now all of a sudden they feel like they have riches inside. Someone in their order, someone in their monastery is the Messiah. So all of a sudden you feel like you have the greatest treasure in the world and you want to nurture it, right? You want to appreciate it. You want to connect with it. And it shifts everything.
It really does. And you can watch it on social media. I mean, I don't know how much, Marie, you've been going on Facebook at all, but it's really pretty phenomenal to see what people are posting. I mean, I have laughed, I have cried, I have shared all those things more than I ever have before because people are really, musicians are doing free concerts and songs from their kitchens. People are...
They're creating.
Just in our neighborhood alone, I don't know if you saw this, but in our neighborhood here in Chapel Hill, people are putting their holiday lights out so that when people are walking at night,
wow,
it's bringing joy to people. People are putting teddy bears in the windows so that when families take their kids on the walk, they play "I Spy the Teddy Bear." Where's the teddy bear in the different houses? I mean, it's just amazing. And so as these monks looked through a different lens and found the greatness and the goodness and the love through just the seed planting from the rabbi,
right,
this virus has given us something.
I know it's calling out the best in human beings. And isn't it amazing where the rabbi says, "No, I have nothing to give you,
right,
really."
Right.
But then he gives.
But let me leave you with this tidbit.
Right. That touches the world, right?
Right.
And I think that's what we're all here for. There is that kind of living light, those riches and gems inside us all. And without sometimes a catalyst for change, you miss it.
Yeah.
You and I are sitting here, we're podcasting on a Monday, right? Normally we'd have kids going this direction in school and that direction in school, and we'd have this thing to do and that thing to do, and work is pulling us, the phone's ringing, and and right now things have gotten a little bit to a still point. We're in a still point.
Yeah, I just wrote that to somebody the other day.
Right?
Exactly.
And it's a beautiful experience. And if we look through a different lens, like what would our world look like if we asked these different questions of ourselves, right? And we looked through a different lens on our life. And while there could be all kinds of things that could seem really unfortunate or challenging, or that would evoke our fear, this virus or something else, we all have stressors, right? But if we learn to look at them and say, what's the gift in this? What's a strength that this is calling out in me? What's the light inside me that I know is there, that wants to help somebody else, or touch a life, or just take care of my home, or nurture, my land, or, tend to my flowers, or prune my trees in a very respectful way. I have this extra time right now. We can't be anywhere else but now, here in the present. That still point is taking us deep into the present moment. And like this, saying, what if one among us is the Messiah? Well, what if the Messiah, or the light, whatever term we want to use, right? What if that greatness is inside all of us, and that there's some creative project that you'd wanted to engage, or some nice thing you wanted to do for a neighbor, or something you wanted to tell your kids, or just time you wanted to spend as a family that we just don't always have that kind of time, but we do right now. And so,
and what we're really talking about, if we bring it back to the topic of resilience too, and the moving through something versus bouncing back to what we were before, it is so clear that this coronavirus pandemic, they're calling it, is going to change humanity moving forward from this point on. It's not going to go back to the way it was. I have no doubt. It is.
No,
it's
a reset into something new.
It's impacting everything on our planet. So I think this is something to embrace. I think it's something to marinate in and learn from, and I think it's something to move through as a collective. And really contemplate the question, which contagion am I going to choose? The one of kindness, love, courage, goodness, light, or the one of scarcity, lack, and fear?
Right. It's a question for all of us. And
because, Marie, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the invitation to fear is definitely here.
That's kind of an ever-present invitation in our world today, the way our world has been oriented and what we've been conditioned into, right? As a collective, as a human species. I think we could even be resetting that. We could just use this opportunity to look at more beautiful things happening, even while something that could be scary, could be challenging, is also circulating on the planet. It's also another way we can look at it. And the stronger we become at practicing that appreciation and looking for the light, it goes back to all the concepts we've talked about, Lacy, over the last year about intention. And where energy flows, where your attention goes, energy flows. And so when you're looking for good things in your life, even while we're sheltering in place and we're all going through this experience, that tends to be what shows up more. So like the fact that you're on social media and you're seeing all these beautiful exchanges with different people and things that make you laugh and things that reconnect you with people, that's your intention. The energy is following that attention and intention.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But if people are looking for things to be afraid of, they can certainly, and that will lead them as well on. They may not be on social media where love is being shared like that.
Right.
If they're afraid and it's triggering some really uncomfortable feelings inside themselves, and they want to look at the worst case scenarios and how bad can it really get, and how might that affect me and my family. There's plenty of websites, I'm sure, that can take you down that path. And so we create what we energetically spend time with, right? So when we're energetically infusing our daily life right now, focusing on what we're afraid of and what we fear, that is a form of manifesting. And when you do it on a collective scale, that it magnifies. But the same thing is true if we focus on what are the blessings of this experience. How could this world positively change as a result of this virus, right?
Well, and I was going to say, and it sort of speaks to that. But, while the invitation to fear is definitely here, in every minute that an invitation to fear is here, so is the invitation to its opposite, right?
Right.
And the invitation to see the good in people, to feel the love for the self and for others, just
and
like
to
the
look
monks
where
did.
vibrance and health is showing
Right.
up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
And that's kind of a tool in and of itself, that when fear starts to come up,
Right.
it's important to acknowledge it. It's important to accept it as something that's coming up. But then the very next thing could be to ask yourself, what is its opposite?
Right.
What is it asking me
Right.
to look at?
Right. Exactly. What's available to me in my daily life where I can really be present. And I think we wanted to talk about that, Lacy. Just a few things that we looked up online, a couple of just tips on staying positive, right?
Well,
and
really more
tools.
about like how to let go of fear or not really engage fear.
Right.
And I found there's a lot of people are talking about this in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
And so I kind of pulled a couple ones that I thought were important.
Well, and the first one we've already touched on already, but I think we should really state again is being fully present. When you're in the present moment, it's a lot harder to go into the past of all your past wounds, triggers, and fears. And it's also harder to go into you can't be in the present and the future at the same time. So if you're really present about what your life is right now, how do you want to be creating and experiencing this moment? You let go of the future of like what all this is going to cause and all the things that you're worried about. You can be present in the moment. That helps you make that conscious choice. Do you want to spend your time in fear, or do you want to spend your time in gratitude or love or creativity or kindness? There's options there.
Right.
And
right.
so,
Right. And then, a second thing is understanding that fear is really a perception of the mind. It's sort of a figment of our imagination in a way.
Right.
And it can, we have an understanding that fear of something that might happen in the future is a perception of the mind. It can provide us with great calmness and peace. Since it hasn't happened yet, and it may never happen, we only think it might happen in our mind. And then we play that over and over again like a movie in our head. So if we realize that the fear is not tangible, nor physical in the physical world yet, and we begin to understand that it's just this perception, kind of like a dream, then maybe we are more inclined, or we will have more ability to let it go and realize that it is not real, that it hasn't happened. And then we're free to move into a calmer place and a place of reality in the present.
Well, and to me, that goes back to all the conversations we had about the ego, which is very well equipped, right?
Right.
To train us and teach us and keep, help us to keep looking at things that it's afraid of. Because if it can anticipate them, it can try and defend against them. But all it does is keep our attention engrossed and engaged in what we're afraid about, right?
Right.
So very important. And when you stay in the present moment, your ego doesn't have as much of a chance to get a grip on where you're placing your attention and what you're giving your energy to, right? So did you want to lead us to the next one, Lacy?
Sure. Also, we want to talk about courage, courage of letting go. Sometimes we need to let go of things in our lives that are contributing or providing fuel to our fear. I talk a lot about things that we don't want and that we give energy to. It's kind of like a fire. Yeah. If there's a fire in the middle of the room, and we're not in the middle of the room, but let's say we're cold and we want a fire. Right. What are we going to do to feed the fire? We're going to give it kindling wood and paper and maybe even gasoline. We want to grow the fire, to grow the heat, to help us, because that's what we're looking for. But if we don't want that fire, then we have to do something. We have to turn away. And if we turn away our attention from the fire, it's eventually going to go out because we're not feeding it.
Right. Exactly.
And so fear is very much that way.
It's something that needs to be fed.
It absolutely needs to be fed. And there's all kinds of ways that our mind finds to feed it.
Right.
So it is possible to start training our minds to look away, walk away, and not feed the fire of fear.
Right. And feed the things we really want to be growing in our experience. And
Right.
that's the only
Yes.
thing we can fully be
Yes.
in charge of right now is our own experience.
Yes.
Right? We can't change everybody else's experience of this virus in the world, but we can be like the monks.
Right.
They just, of 5 beings, they just started appreciating inside themselves because they might be the Messiah. And they also started appreciating the others because they could be too. Right? And that's what they chose to put their attention and their energy into. And they didn't change the whole world. That wasn't their intention. They just started loving what they were and what those around them were.
Exactly.
And that changed the entire atmosphere and the climate of their monastery. And I think that's true of us on the world. If we can ground in the truth of the light and ground that there's much more goodness and health than what necessarily we're hearing about in the news that always perfectly likes to sensationalize things at times to get more viewers, to get more, right, to raise the numbers, right, and all of those things. But it plays to our egos instead of our hearts. Right? And our hearts know what the news is. Right. And the monks found what the news was. And the news was that they could be the Messiah, that they have the light inside them. And I think that's the larger message of this story and perhaps our podcast is...
because people are turning to the light in each other. They're wanting to help each other find a light in the darkness.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. And the calm in the storm.
Yeah.
And I think human beings are naturally wired to connect and cooperate, and we're much less wired to be divided and separated like we've been conditioned. I mean, so this story of the rabbi's gift, but also the virus on the planet right now, is reminding us of these age-old truths that human beings have been trying to make sense of, from poets to scientists to philosophers and artists, for centuries. But it always comes back to, really, do you believe that human beings are naturally cooperative and good and kind and, wanting to grow and learn and to cooperate and to create community? Or do you believe that we're really divided and that viruses and things, scary things outside of us, can take us down, right? And make us scarce, right? And make us scared. Really, how about that?
Yeah.
Scarcity to scared.
Yeah.
That also, it triggers that we have a lack of health and a lack of resources and a lack of knowledge to combat this virus. But really, what ultimately I think the rabbi's gift and the rabbi's message is, you have everything inside. You have everything you need inside. Right. And that's what our natural immune system is truly meant to be, when it's allowed to work for us in the way it was originally created. But we've tampered with things through many, many, many lifetimes, and also in more recent years with the toxicities on our planet. So there's a lot of, obviously, things for reflection in this time as we shelter in place and we learn to embrace a new kind of change that's changing all of us. I mean, that's something we are preparing for, is that our world might be different after this experience, as we come through this experience. And we aren't necessarily, as I forget the author's name you mentioned in the beginning, but when he was talking about resilience, we aren't necessarily trying to go back to who we were before we've had this global experience.
Right.
And I, for one, don't really believe we are going to return to what we were, because we've had this experience and we've already shifted inside, right?
That's right. And frankly, I don't want to go back. I don't want our world to necessarily go back to the way it was, because there was so much about it that's broken. That's a podcast for another day.
Could be a catalyst for some tremendous shifts in all kinds of businesses and banking and the way governments work and how the world functions together as a living community globally. That's what we are. Right. We're a living community that exists across this globe. And I think there will be reflections on this for years to come, of what humanity did in this time and what we chose as a community, as a collective, to rise to meet this challenge inside ourselves as individuals. If we all did our part and we looked inside for the light and the gifts we all have within and the immune systems we all naturally have, And if we trusted and put our faith in those things instead of trusting the virus to take us out, right? That's what can happen when you give fear the power, right, to take you down into the spiral of your greatest fear versus turning to the courage and the knowing and the strength that we have the gifts and things we need inside to lead us through this. It's a complete orientation shift to life.
Yes.
And I think that we need something like that on that scale is definitely being summoned forth. And I think we'll see this in the weeks and days and months ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was going to say one of the last tools that we had listed here that I did want to mention and not miss is aligning with your purpose. And when you're focused, for me, purpose also dovetails with creativity and creation and being a creator. And when we use this time to make something artistic or to write or to, connect with somebody or something where we are expressing ourselves as a creator, as a creative, we all have this life force inside us that wants to make things, right? That wants to create things. And when we align with our purpose, we focus on the good things of how we want to move energy through us each day right now. We really contribute. We can very well contribute it to a much more positive world. But it does take discipline, and we've talked about this in some other podcasts over last year. But it takes some discipline and some discernment of what to listen to, how to integrate it, and listening for resonance, whether the fear you're being told or sold on some channels is actually resonating with who you are. If you say, well, I know the virus is out there, so's the cold virus, right? So many things. There's many germs out there, right? And yet our immune systems are naturally, for many of us, very strong. And for the ones that have a compromised immune system, it's still an opportunity for you to look inside at your strengths. Look at those monks in a dying order.
Right.
They were in their 70s. They didn't see any way to bring new life and new life force to their monastery. And yet with the shift in perspective that they had everything inside them that they needed, that they had the light within, just like the Messiah, all of a sudden everything changed. And so we really can become channels and conduits of that positive energy, even though we know about the fear and we know about a virus that's out there. We have a lot of goodness in here. And often the light wins. If we allow it to, the light can win, the light can prevail. And the light can lead a humanity into resetting a whole new structure and belief system and way of being in the world. And I, for one, have always been a big advocate and believer in part-time work. I don't necessarily know. Do we have to work 40 hours a week? And essentially, could this virus and these changes that are unfolding in all of our lives that seem to come through in quite an unexpected situation. Nobody anticipated this a number of months ago, right? But could this be an opportunity for real positive change and a restructuring and a resetting of how we live our lives on planet Earth in our own ways, in our daily lives, in our local communities? So the positive side of this is this introspection and this reflection. We're all being given this time right now to sort of reevaluate what in our lives is working for us, what in our lives may not be working for us. And that's as individuals, but as a global collective, we're going to learn a lot from this experience. And that might just bring some avenues and new pathways for great change.
And growth and strength.
Growth,
just
right?
To bring it back to what we had, the resilience concept that we began with.
Exactly. But an expanded version of growth, right? That
right. Growth as an individual, as a community, and as an entire humanity.
Right.
Pretty big stuff.
So, these are powerful times. These are definitely powerful times. And I, for one, always like to go to literature or poems or the arts, really, that kind of stir the soul in a different way versus just having conversations from up in our heads and analyzing the data.
Right.
I think we sometimes grow and we can move through and past some of those things and glean broader insights when we allow the artistic insights into our lives. And so thank you for joining me today and, bringing this Rabbi's gift to our attention and to our listeners and our audience today.
Yeah, no, thank you for making time to do this with me.
Yeah, and I think I would certainly love to invite all of our listeners to like this video and to share it on your social media platforms. We welcome you to visit our website at wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org. And we want to thank our sustainer donors that give each and every month to keep these positive messages flowing and these greater visions we have of impacting the world in a bigger scale, perhaps as part of these resets and this new change on the planet, right? These infusions of new energy and a new focus inside us. And so, the world, big change is made by small steps, right? And small gifts.
That's right.
And so we definitely appreciate everybody who gives to Whole Soul School and Foundation. You can visit us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can see we post these beautiful quotes at least twice a week, sometimes more, that are just these daily kind of medicine doses for the soul to uplift you and inspire you in your day, in your week. And we have a wonderful poet, Flower Diamond, who asks a lot of great questions that in that artistic way that speaks to the soul, invites you to look at your life differently or turn something upside down and see it from a different angle. Isn't that amazing what the arts do? They do invite us to see differently. And I just want to thank you, Lacy, and I want to thank all of our listeners. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back in April for some new podcasts, Fireside Chats, but hopefully also some transformation talks and maybe a Global Light Spotlight. We'll be bringing more infusions of inspiration as we all ride out this experience and, learn how to move energy inside us in our conscious attention and intention. It's all about energy. It's all about energy.
Yep.
We live in an energetic universe, and we're seeing that very powerfully right now. And whatever thread is running through your life, you get in the present moment the opportunity to choose what energy you're going to participate in. More the global good and bringing positive energy to the world, or adding to the collective fear. And so we're co-creating this moment, this present moment right now together all the time. And in the next moment, we get another choice to create that world. So we're creating all the time. And we thank you for joining us in the creation of Whole Soul School and Foundation and these conversations. And we'll see you again in April of 2020. Be safe, be well, and we send lots of blessings. Thank you. Namaste.